Joining us now, back by popular demand, he should get his own radio show. I've told you that. It should be the Fighting Joe Show because he's so good in the radio. Joe Morrissey is with us, former House of Delegates member, Richmond, former Commonwealth's attorney, former prosecutor, Virginia, ran for mayor 2016, lost, and also he is a very noted defense attorney. And at one point he won like 52 trials straight or something, some huge number. It was like Joe DiMaggio numbers. All I remember is Joe DiMaggio hitting 56 straight games. That's a record that'll never be touched, in my opinion, as a baseball fan. Also, Joe won like 250 cases or something like that. It's like 200. He's like the champ. That's why he should have his own radio show. And he's with us now. Joe Morrissey. Welcome, Joe.
Good morning, John. How are you?
You're in Savannah. I'm live from New York City, so we're on opposite ends here. It's raining.
You're up there covering the UN, the president's speech to the UN. You go all over the place, don't you?
Joe, I get out, man. I get out. That's why I beat my competition, because everybody else sits in the office. They have a big staff. They read you the paper over the air. Somebody brings them the Richmond Times-Dispatch. They read the headlines. They get a coffee and a donut. Me, on the other hand, I'm out bringing the news to my audience every day, and I'll be at the prison's press conference today at 5 p.m. Maybe I'll get a chance to ask a question. We'll have to see. In the meantime, Joe, I wanted to get you on today. You know, we're covering Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford coming today, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But here's what I want to start with. Bill Cosby, sentenced to prison. I mean, to see him being let off yesterday in handcuffs for a person my age who grew up with him, it was kind of like, wow. And he's legally blind. What's your take?
Well, you said earlier, you talked about a steep fall from grace, and that's certainly true. But here are the facts. He's now been designated a sexually violent predator. He must register as a sex offender. And that was for his conviction for sexually assaulting Andrea Constand in 2004, almost a decade and a half ago. And certainly all the talking heads on TV and some of the pundits are talking about this 3 to 10 year sentence and this 81-year-old man that may die in prison. And I think they're missing a couple of important points that I'd like to, just nobody has talked about, but it certainly concerned me as somebody that likes to see justice done. John, I think even though you and I come from different perspectives, a Republican conservative perspective from you, I tend to be more Democratic and libertarian. But one thing that I think we both see and demand is that there's got to be, in the criminal justice system, there's got to be due process. There's got to be a level playing field. It's got to be fair, and you don't go after somebody because of whom they are, but rather because of the charge. And one of the things that has troubled me about this case is what I'm going to share with you right now, you and your viewers. And that's this. Remember how this case came to light. The current prosecutor, Kevin Steele, was not the district attorney back then, but rather he challenged the incumbent district attorney, and his campaign material was that Bill Cosby case should go before a grand jury and he should be prosecuted. The then prosecuting district attorney said that the evidence wasn't there to support it, declined the prosecution. So Bill Cosby became fodder in a bitter campaign between the current DA Steele and the former DA who lost to him. Sure enough, DA Steele gets elected and he pursues Cosby. Now that was troubling for me. Forget about the facts associated with it, but he was a political chip in a political campaign. And was he prosecuted because of an egregious violation of the law, or was he prosecuted because it was payback for what he said he would do during the political campaign? That's the first thing that's troubling. The second thing that's troubling is that this was the second trial. The very first trial, the presiding judge who presided in both cases refused to let other alleged victims, some with case histories 30 years old or older, testify. Bill Cosby's first trial ended in a hung jury, but his second trial, the judge let these women testify. John, in my opinion, that is why Cosby was convicted. It wasn't just the Cosby versus Andrea Constand, but rather this other testimony from these other women, and I think that is a huge, significant issue on appeal. I'm going to say it now. I think the case will be reversed.
And that is based on, is that based on the fact that the statute of limitations ran out? I mean, how does that work in this? Because
it's based
that's not clear
strictly on
to
the
people.
fact that the judge allowed other crimes evidence to come in this trial. For example, he's on trial for the sexual assault of Constand. In Virginia, for example, you can't put on other uncharged facts or other allegations from other victims because it tends to prejudice the jury and say, well, if he did it in those cases, he probably did it in this. It has to be, what is the evidence involving Constand? Did he do it? But here, the jurors are conflicted because they're told about this other evidence. Now, the prosecutor thought that was relevant. The judge didn't allow it in the first trial. He allowed other extrinsic evidence in the second trial, and I think the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania will reverse his trial because of that. The other thing is that what I think is surprising is that the judge denied bail, and I think there's a significant issue on appeal that would probably normally warrant a bail. There was also some evidence of a conflict between his lawyers alleged a conflict. I don't know if there was one or not. So yeah, I think the case will result in a reversal. In the meantime, I think Cosby will spend at least a year, perhaps 18 months in jail before that reversal occurs. And at the end of the day, I'm not weighing in on whether he did it or not. I'm very troubled when you go back 15, 20, 30 years on a case. And here's why I'm troubled by that. Because it's so difficult for somebody to defend themselves against that allegation. There's a concept called pre-indictment delay. If the charges are from years ago or decades ago, how memories fade, potential witnesses die, people who absolutely believe that XYZ occurred are wrong because it's 30 years ago. How many times, John, have you had a conversation with your wife and you said to her, to Ann, I absolutely guarantee you, Ann, that such and such happened 2 years ago, only to be confronted with the fact that it didn't, and you hit yourself in and you go, oh my, that's right, I forgot about that. Memories fade after a year, 2 years, 3 years. In this particular case, we're talking about 15 to 30 years ago in some of the cases. So you have to be so very, very careful when you bring up a case that old. Of course, there's similarities in what's going on in the Supreme Court now, and that might be a good segue. But anyway, that's my feeling. I think the case will be reversed because of prejudicial testimony from alleged victims who were not part of this trial.
Joe, let me just ask you this. One thing you said is that the judge, the first time that judge didn't allow the testimony from the other women. It just had to be from that one woman that which the charges were brought. And then the second judge allowed the other women. I mean, two judges, same thing. Why did one make one decision and the other made the other decision?
It's even more troubling, John. It wasn't two different judges. It was the same judge that presided over both trials. In the first trial, he did not let these other women testify and said, for reasons I just articulated,
right,
that it was prejudicial, that it would violate his rights, etc. They were not allowed to testify at the first trial. That first trial ends in a hung jury, and then the judge reverses himself and says, wait a second, I'm now going to let these women testify. In my opinion, John, that decision dictated the result in the second trial. The jurors were instructed, don't consider what these women said as evidence in the current trial that he committed this offense against Andrea Constant. Only consider it for a peripheral matter. But the jurors can't separate that. And that, I believe, was severely prejudicial, and it dictated the outcome of this trial. Why he did that, I do not know. His attorneys argued in pretrial memorandums that he was biased against the Cosby family.
Biased against the Cosby family, and I guess not happy with the outcome of the first trial.
That is certainly one interpretation.
So then we have a second. We have a second trial, and he changes the rules to get a verdict that he wanted. That
again is a logical interpretation of what happened, and I think that will be the focus of the appeal. So anyway, that's I listen to folks from Fox to CNN to local media to the Associated Press to the all talk about this, but that is something that has not been discussed. They're more interested.
Nobody has said. Nobody has said.
Like his publicist, Cosby's publicist, called it the most racist and sexist trial and persecution by mass media. I don't get into that. I just look at the facts and then give an analysis on it, and I'm troubled by it. I really am. I'm troubled that due process was not followed, and therefore had the potential to deny somebody a fair trial. And that's wrong.
Great analysis, Joe Morrissey. When are we going to see the Joe Morrissey show?
You keep talking about it.
I'm pushing. You'd be great. What do you think? I think you should do it.
I have come from an absolute no, that won't happen, to, I broached it with Myrna, and she says, as if you don't have enough on your plate now that, and as if you're not already, don't have a bullseye on your back, as if you're not already a lightning rod in a lightning storm, you need this. And I got to tell you, some aspects of it appeal to me. I mean, I like, I don't, John, you know me. You've known me for a number of years. I call it the way I see it, and I have a tendency when I do that to anger Democrats, Republicans, independents, but who cares? I don't care. I'm just going to call it the way I see it, and I'm going to keep doing that. So maybe give me that forum, and that's a big step for me to go from that's never going to happen to maybe. So don't.
Well, I'm talking you into it on a daily basis. I'm going to talk to the station. You should follow me at 10 o'clock, and it'll be like John Fredericks in Richmond, then Joe Morrissey. I think that would be like the best 1-2 combination in America, 6 to noon, right? Joe, I got to go, but I got to get you back on Friday because we got to get your take on Dr. Ford, Brett Kavanaugh, and we'll have you on before the vote, which is scheduled now for 9:30 on Friday, which I think Mitch McConnell and Chuck Grassley absolutely did the right thing. Let's vote and get on with it. Up or down, in or out. We're going to find out Thursday and Friday what happens with Judge Kavanaugh.
Let me just end by saying I would like to have seen more witnesses. I'd like to see that Deborah Ramirez testify under oath. Okay? Let me just end by this. That's part of what I'm talking about. Ramirez comes across and is now the alleged second victim, but then she is disinclined to testify under oath, now admits that she was drunk. It's not a matter of whether I'm a Republican or Democrat. I want to see fairness in the process, and I don't want to see somebody's good name besmirched without a solid foundation for that. So I would look forward to, weighing in with my opinion.
All right, we'll see you then. Joe Morrissey, I'm trying to talk him into getting his own radio show.